Welcome, Nico, to Bowtie Tuesday today. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Bina. Appreciate it.
Of course. So, for our audience, I want to let you guys know Nico is the executive director of the Georgetown University Capitol Campus, and he's going to be talking to us today about this graduate student work and analysis that he's been doing for a little bit now. Does that sound
Yeah,
cool?
works for me. Looking forward to it.
Okay. So I'm going to start off with the fact that I got to meet you at the Trade Lines conference in Scottsdale a few weeks back. You just presented on what you're calling the grad student age shift. For a campus planner who's been working off the same grad space assumptions for 20 years, what has actually changed?
Yeah, so what we have noticed over the last 20 years, and this is both at Georgetown and nationwide trend, is that graduate students are getting younger. And it's not just a little shift. We're talking significant shifts over the last 20 years in that if we break down the age cohorts into kind of three major groups. So we have the 24 and under graduate students, we have the 25 to 29-year-old grad student cohort right in the middle, and then we have the 30 and over cohort. This is both men and women across different ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomic status. We're just looking at ages. And over the last 20 years, the share of those 30 and older that are going to grad school has gone down. The share that's about 25 to 29, at most, it's stayed flat. It's gone down a little bit. So really, grad enrollment has grown over the last 20 years. The only growth that's happened is in that 24 and under cohort. It's gone from about a 20% share back in 2003 to now 30% share in the last fall 2025 semester. Huge growth. And it's amazing to see over the last 20 years that graduate students are in fact getting younger.
That's an amazing shift. You built this graduate youth index on 20 years of national data. Pretty impressive. What's the single most counterintuitive finding? The one thing a facilities leader would not have predicted.
Yeah, so that it's not just that they're getting younger. We had this model in campus planning and studies that a graduate student, typically you get your undergraduate degree, and then for a non-research field, you're typically going out, getting a job, maybe several jobs, maybe even getting married, having kids, settling down, and then you're coming back to get your graduate degree. What we're seeing is that shift, while there's still that cohort happening, the biggest shift is that students now are going right from their undergraduate degree right into graduate school. And so they're at a different stage in their life than what we assume your typical graduate student is. So it's not that just graduate students are getting younger, it's all the different ways they interact and use campus and their lifestyle change. Those are all completely different. They're not just a younger graduate student, they're almost a completely new cohort, a completely new segment that graduate schools need to serve.
Interesting. Okay. When you're seeing that you have younger grad students that are becoming more like undergrads, I know you're not saying it's not necessarily that they're younger, but you made a point that they're at a different stage in their life, as what we've seen in the past. They're spending maybe longer hours on campus. They're collaborative instead of being heads down. They're maybe looking for wellness and social space. What does that mean for you and how you plan a building? And then where do you think CFOs and planners might be getting it wrong?
Yeah, so that's now when we realize this data, and this is a new segment that's growing and it's going to continue to grow for a while through demographic trends and other key points, then it becomes a little bit different on, okay, you're the student body that you're serving, if that population looks differently, then acts differently than compared to previous cohorts, then your physical systems need to change, your pedagogy probably needs to change as well. And so when we look at, say, a typical graduate student was probably a working professional, may or may not have had a family, in which case they're working typically day job, and then a lot of times they're coming to classes in the evening, maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, but it's usually for a multi-hour lecture in the evening hours. Whereas today, if you're going right from undergraduate school to graduate school, you may or may not have a full-time job. More likely, you don't have a full-time job based on current data on the marketplace. And so in which case you're taking classes full-time. You may have evening classes, but you're way more likely to be able to take an 11 a.m. class on a Tuesday for graduate school, where in the past that was not necessarily the case unless now you're a full-time student. Then these younger graduate students, they look at grad school as their full-time job. And so they will take classes during the daytime that mirror similar to what their undergraduate schedule was like. So you might take Monday, Wednesday, Friday class or Tuesday, Thursday class that are an hour and a half long each versus just one Wednesday night from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. class. So if your students are more, they're on campus more often, they're utilizing more resources. If I'm a CFO and I'm planning a space for older graduate students that I know are only here once a week, I don't need to offer them housing. I don't need to offer them food services or very limited food service and wellness services. Whereas now, if I'm looking at these younger graduate students who are acting more like undergrads, now all those things are absolutely on the table, how I service them.
Absolutely, right. It's thinking about the space for a different kind of demographic or a different type of student than we might have been thinking of at least 15, 20 years ago. You're running the Capitol campus at Georgetown. It's one of the most visible new campuses in higher ed. What have you had to operationally adjust since opening because the way grad students actually use the space maybe didn't match how it was designed?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very excited. Georgetown's very excited about the Capitol campus. And Georgetown has two campuses inside the District of Columbia. So we have our traditional historic Hilltop campus that's in the Georgetown neighborhood. When most people think of Georgetown, they think of Healy Hall and those historic buildings. But certainly over the last 10 years, the university has really expanded its presence in downtown DC. Our law school has been here for over 50 years. But in the last 10 years, we've almost doubled our footprint, or more than doubled our footprint in terms of the number of buildings, number of square foot that we have under roof. And so it's amazing to see where the growth is happening in the district and with the university. It's happening here at the Capitol campus. And with that growth, we service now a wide swath of the community. So we have undergraduates here on campus. We have law school students here on campus. We have your traditional graduate classes, but we also have our continuing education and professional education classes too. The student body that we serve here is very different than just the Hilltop that focuses mostly on undergraduate and some research education. And so with that, you have as close to a 24/7 downtown hub as you can get. We have undergraduate classes during the day, graduate classes during the day. We have graduate classes in the evening. We have law school classes during the daytime, law school classes in the evening. And so one of the things that we, as the Capitol campus in the downtown urban core, one of the things that we're really focusing on is the campus is a part of the community as much as the community is a part of the campus. And so to be able to say at the Hilltop campus, if students want food or a meal plan, typically it's provided on campus. Whereas here, yes, we do want to offer food services, but at the same time too, we want our students to go out into the neighborhood to experience the different retail and restaurants there. We want our spaces to be open to be able to experience that. And so for the community to come to our campus too. So that works out. The idea is that the more open and expansive we can be, the better off. And so that's something that, as the Capitol campus grew, how can we connect with those partners that we have throughout the neighborhood and with the district and go from there?
I want to double click on that a little bit. Are you able to provide any examples of how you're able to achieve that symbiosis between the community neighborhood and what's happening on campus? How are you able to bridge that sharing of space?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's part of it. So it's one, there's a lot of coordination. We have obviously the District of Columbia, the city government. Yeah, we obviously, being in Washington, D.C., we have federal government partners, but then we also have local neighborhood partners. So from community improvement districts, business improvement districts, restaurant associations, hotel associations, to be able to say, hey, if we treat the university as a business in this neighborhood, what are some of the connections that we want to make? And so it's making sure that we have those regular meetings with our business improvement districts, with the chambers of commerce, Washington Trade Group, things like that, to be able to say, hey, we want to be a part of the community. Georgetown is dedicated to the District of Columbia. We want the district to grow. At the same time, we want the university to grow. And so how can we work together basically with all these different partners to be able to say, okay, Business Improvement District wants to be able to focus on placemaking and revitalize economic development in certain areas where, when we work with the District of Columbia, maybe we're talking about transportation issues and how the university can help and work there. So it's being able to say a university is as close to a city as you can get. And so how can we as one small city work with other partners within this big city?
All right, makes sense. You wrote after trade lines that institutions need to treat space as a financial and operational resource and use data to challenge assumptions. That's the thing we talk about all the time here. You can't optimize what you can't see. So having that having that data to have the right conversation is so critical. For a facilities leader who is watching this with a grad program expansion on their 5-year plan, what's the one thing you tell them to measure before they break ground?
So what a lot of people will look at, what a lot of universities will look at is enrollment growth and projections in enrollment, especially private institutions that get most of their revenue from tuition. Having growing enrollment is certainly helpful. And I'm certainly saying universities, that it's not like we get away from enrollment focus. We should absolutely be enrollment focused, but within enrollment, there are different categories. We need to segment that enrollment, those enrollment numbers a little bit better, because not just because you're labeled as a grad student doesn't mean that your graduate student education is the same as every other graduate student experience. It's different if you're working in medical research. It's different if you're at the law school. It's different if you're in a humanities or an earth common or an engineering program. Every graduate program is a little bit different. And then again, too, you could be a seasoned business professional coming back to get your MBA, maybe in your mid to late 30s and coming back to campus, versus if you're an undergraduate, you recently just graduated and going to graduate school. That experience, even though on paper we're all graduate students, your experiences and what you're coming with into the program is a little bit different. What you're expecting from the program is a little bit different. And so, if anything, I would say to universities, obviously focus on enrollment. That's key. But then within enrollment, how are you segmenting that? Are you making sure that you get a diverse swath of graduate students, but at the same time, how are you servicing those graduate students is going to make a big difference. So I would say segment that as much as you possibly can.
All right. So just to repeat it back to you, the takeaway is, for example, don't just label them as graduate students, double click on what exact program they're going into. And that in itself is going to build cohorts that are going to allow you to align their experience based on what they're actually studying in the program itself, correct?
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about the Capitol Campus is that we're integrating all of these different programs that have really great overlap. So example would be we have programs in our medical school and programs in our law school here that are overlapping to be able to say, hey, can we focus on health insurance reform? You need to know a little bit about medicine. You need to know a little bit about law and policy. And so be able to say, okay, can we lead some research in healthcare reform? Same thing too with business, being close to the US Capitol. Being in downtown, our law school, our business school, our public policy school can overlap to say, hey, how can we focus on maybe international trade? Where are some things that we can segment and focus on? And that's what the Capitol Campus is doing, really bringing those programs that can overlap and being able to work together.
Excellent. Gosh, Nico, it was wonderful to talk to you today. You're working on some fascinating stuff. I was so impressed with your presentation back at Tradeline. So thank you for taking the time and educating folks on how the grad student profile is changing and how campuses have to ideally match that new generation of grad students. Thanks for the time today.